Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Happy Thursday. We are so excited to have you here to join Lead Her Space. We are excited. Come on in. Come on in. It's 7 o'clock. We know what time it is. It is time for us to rock, us ladies to rock. So come on in. We're excited. We have a phenomenal lineup today. I am your co host, one of your co hosts, Dr. Angelita Howard. And I'm so excited to be here with you tonight. We are so excited, along with our co founder, Dr. LaShante Walker. We are here tonight. We're going to have some live conversations, some good, strong conversation. Get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready for what you're going to hear. Get ready for what we're going to experience tonight. It's going to be like no other night that we've had. So I invite you to share, to like, to click, show the hearts, share, watch, start a watch party, share with your friends. Tonight is going to be a good night. We're excited about what we're going to hear tonight. And so, with that, I want to welcome Dr. LaShante Walker, our co founder, to introduce our special guest. But come on in, bring your friends in, bring your families in, share, click, like, click, share, all of that. Thank you so much for being here and joining us tonight.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. We're so excited about this particular session of Lead Her Space, and we're talking about women in activism. And so, our first guest that we have is activist Jeneisha Harris. Jeneisha is a student, a writer, an organizer, and activist, a Memphis native, and self proclaimed rebel. She serves as an Ignite National Fellow, Free Breakfast Program continuing organizer, Barbara J. Harris Scholarship Fund founder, and a Nashville Community Bail Fund community organizer. With 2 arrests and an unjustified warrant targeting her activism, the state of Tennessee has attempted to silence her voice and her work. Jeneisha perseveres every time by continuing her work despite the local and statewide obstacles. As an aspiring pediatric psychologist, she plans to merge mental health and community with programming aimed at those who do not have access to mental health care resources, while advocating for mental health care policy reform and justice in every aspect for all. Tonight, I want to welcome Ms. Jeneisha Harris. Jeneisha, please introduce yourself and say hello to our audience.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Um, as you perfectly stated in my bio, I'm a student at Tennessee State University studying biology and psychology double major and have a minor in political science. I am an organizer, an activist, and a self proclaimed rebel.
We're so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Our next
Absolutely.
Our next special guest tonight is our facilitator. She'll be interviewing Ms. Harris, is Minister Demetria McCroskey. Just a little bit about her. With an upbringing based in Christian values, Demetria has the heart of a true servant leader and vessel of God. Born and reared by her grandparents in rural area of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, called Shiloh, Demetria quickly learned the value of spirituality and believing, hoping, trusting in Jesus Christ. She accepted Christ at the young age of 9 and was baptized at New Bethel AME Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. After graduating high school, Demetria began her higher education journey at Lane College, which then later led her to American Baptist College in Nashville, Tennessee, also known as the Holy Hill, where she received her Bachelor of Arts in Biblical and Theological Studies in May 2015. Additionally, Demetria obtained her Master of Arts degree in Organizational Leadership in May 2017, and Demetria is currently enrolled in the Doctorate of Education in Leadership and Professional Practice at Trevecca University. On December 2017, she was the first woman licensed to preach, and I was there, and professed that she was a minister of the gospel at her home church of Walnut Grove Missionary Baptist Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. She is currently employed with American Baptist College, where she serves as the director of Title III programs and as an adjunct instructor. Her mother, Catherine McCroskey, her grandmother, excuse me, Catherine McCroskey, was a very influential force in her life and upbringing. She is the mother of one daughter, who is also named Catherine. And Demetria strives to live her life's calling, to ensure that she does all that she can to nurture her gifts, her gift of preaching, her gift of teaching, and her gift of ministry. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you our facilitator for the evening, Miss Minister Demetria McCroskey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. Thank you, Dr. Howard, for inviting me into LeadHerSpace. I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
You got some technical difficulties going on there, so we want to make sure you're good to be our facilitator tonight. While she's getting that cleared up, we just have a couple of announcements they want to share about the format tonight. So we're going to have a discussion between Minister McCroskey and Ms. Harris. They're going to share with us about activism and social justice and what we as women can do to be more involved in the protests movement that are going on right now, and just social justice in general, and how important it is for women to be in these spaces and be a part of this conversation. And after they have a conversation and dialogue, we're going to invite you in. So please feel free to drop your questions below so that I'll be helping with the Q&A portion. And Dr. Howard also will be watching to see what your questions are. We'll post them in the chat for our speakers to help guide them along during that time. And then don't hang up. Still tune in to the very end, because Dr. Howard and I will be giving some special instructions and announcements about LeadHerSpace. So I'll let the two of you take it over. Thank you.
Can you all hear me all right now?
Yes, you're perfect now.
Okay. Okay, I was worried. I was like, oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Walker. Thank you so much, Dr. Howard. I am extremely, extremely excited to be in the LeadHerSpace community this evening. I'm extremely excited to be able to interview Ms. Jeneisha Harris. Welcome. Thank you so much for thinking of me and allowing me to be a part of this opportunity. I'm going to start off with Jeneisha and saying, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to be a part of activism in the community.
Yes, first of all, again, I'm so excited to share a space with so many amazing women. I started off originally from Memphis, Tennessee, in a very small but poor neighborhood called Orange Mound. And so after high school, I went to Tennessee State University, where I am currently still a student. And I've been involved in the political space in Tennessee and nationally for about 4 to 5 years. And so more recently, I dived into activism, because activism and politics are two totally different things. And so I always campaigned for state representatives, state senators, mayoral campaigns, just all things campaigns. I was an intern. And so I just remember being in those offices behind those desks thinking that there is more. And I didn't know what that more was until I dived deeper into activism. And so I kind of traded my political belt for my activism belt. And I've been organizing ever since. I organized my first protest here in Nashville. It was a student-led movement. And then that proceeded to more protests and more actions and more issues that we wanted to fight for. And so the past year, I've started my own free breakfast program. In my bio, she read that I stated continuing organizer, because the free breakfast program started in 1969 by the Black Panther Party. And so I'm basically continuing that work here in Nashville in 2020. And so that's a little bit about the work that I do. It's a mixture of activism and organizing and civil disobedience. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm familiar with Orange Mound. I have some friends in Memphis. So yeah, I know that it's definitely a part of the community that doesn't get a lot of recognition, but I'm glad to see that you were able to live above that and come out of that community and still be an advocate and a voice for marginalized communities. That's awesome. You said a little bit about starting some movements here in Nashville. Was there one pivotal movement or moment that really made you say, I have to get out in the streets, I have to start activating the calling that's inside of me?
It was one of those campaign jobs. I took the semester off, did all my classes online, and I went to San Diego to work on a campaign. And so at the time, I had just become a White House ambassador for TSU. And so they gave us these really cool graphics to post with our name, our new position, just, to show recognition and just to be proud of, this new accomplishment. And so I had mine on the front screen of my laptop. And I remember one of my coworkers making a racial slur. And he was basically just like, oh, they let N-words in the White House now. And so it was in that moment when, I was starting to think, okay, there has to be more. And I think at that moment, I knew that I did not belong in those type of spaces. And so I'm a very blunt and assertive young person, and I just cannot bite my tongue. And so although I believe that politics is important and being involved in politics is important, I feel like I don't belong in those spaces. Now there are certain people that, do belong in those spaces. I just feel like I'm not one of them. But activism is more community rooted. It's something that I can do and still sleep good at night. I feel like to a certain extent, you have to sell yourself short in the political world, which is why I transformed from all things political to activism. And so, like I said, I'm also a fellow for Ignite. We're a 501c3 political organization, and we basically empower and train young women to run for office in Tennessee and nationally. And I recently came on with the Nashville Community Bail Fund as a community organizer in lieu of my warrant that was actually rescinded in light of the protests this summer. And so the past, I would say, year and a half, I've been arrested twice, almost a third time this summer, just for literally, speaking truth to power. And I think Tennessee has tried to silence my activism with, these arrests and planting things and, just slanderous stories and articles. But I feel like I rise every time when I start another program, when I'm in the community, when I'm out feeding hundreds of children a day. So yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy journey, especially in the South and especially in Tennessee. So yeah, it's been a journey.
I heard you mention a little bit about this past summer. I did read the article and saw the arrest. And I wanted to just ask you, from your journey this summer, we were able to see how the state as well as the nation is continuing to criminalize protest and continuing to criminalize that freedom of speech. So how do we work to combat and reverse those things that are stacked up against us?
When people ask me this, they're always shocked at my answer, but you don't change the law unless you break the law. Martin Luther King Jr., Assata Shakur, Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou, any person that you name, the people that we quote are felons. They died felons. They died breaking the law in order for this freedom that we now benefit from because of them. And so I think protesting has such a negative connotation because oftentimes, in my opinion, it lacks follow-ups. But now we're seeing just a more intricate way of civil disobedience. And I feel like it's so necessary because without the protest, there's no amplification of the issues that you're fighting for. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. And I love that you said that it's almost like a two-way street, or it's a multifaceted ideal where we're thinking about activism. It's not just about the protesting, but it's also about the backhand work. So tell me a little bit more about some of the things that you do in the community. I heard you talking about feeding hundreds of children and different things like that. So tell me a little bit more about that side of the activism.
Yes, so the Free Breakfast program was something that I continued here in Nashville last summer. It's basically me partnering with churches, following the motto of the Black Panther Party, where this whole thing started, and just literally feeding children in the community daily, free breakfast. Studies have shown that children are more ready for the day and more attentive when they have a hot meal, as opposed to milk and cereal that's cold, that's bland, that's really not appetizing. And so I've definitely seen the difference in, the children at Mount Carmel Baptist Church from the first day that I started to, a couple of weeks ago. And so in 1969, the Black Panther Party started the free breakfast program, and it spread it all throughout the country. And it ended up, and a lot of people don't know this, but it ended up challenging the federal government, because back then they didn't have, what the children have in public schools now, which is free lunch where you can pay $1 or it's free. That didn't exist back in, the 1960s. And so this program put pressure on the government to actually create the programs that our kids now benefit from. So, yeah, it was something that I started last summer. I actually was supposed to evolve and branch out to New York, Memphis, Atlanta, and continue in Nashville. But because of COVID, I had to consolidate all of that work to Nashville, because, I really couldn't travel. But yeah, I actually just ended the program a couple of weeks ago. It's normally a summer program, but because of the great and drastic need that, the parents and the children of North Nashville needed, I felt, the responsibility to continue the program as long as I needed to. And so it's a people-funded grassroots program that I continued. I really don't like to use the word started, because the ancestors, have paved the way for me to be able to continue this program. And so I, try to give all honor and thanks to them. But continuing this program in Nashville is something that has really been so fulfilling. I don't get paid to do it. It's a lot of hard work. I'm only one person, but the results of, the work regarding free breakfast and free food and hot breakfast for the children have been super, super rewarding. Actually a year ago, a few days ago, I lost my mother, and I started a scholarship fund in her honor. And so actually next semester in January, I'll be giving away 2 scholarships to 2 students back in both of our old high school, Melrose High School. So I'm super excited about that.
That's awesome. That is extremely great. And it sounds like that you yourself are becoming that role model and that mentor that other people can look up to and younger generations can look up to. Let's talk a little bit about the mentorship and the role models that you had in your life that led you to come to this work.
Yes. I had an old mentor. Her name is Carlissa Shaw. And I would always go over her house. She was a lawyer, and she always had these civil rights pictures in her living room. And I would just always look at them in awe, because most of those pictures were taken in Memphis when, Dr. King was assassinated back in '68. And so she was definitely a mentor that had a pivotal place in my life. She introduced me to all things political. I would go to like Young Democrat meetings with her. And it really opened my eyes up to a different spectrum of life, because coming from, a neighborhood like Orange Mound, you're not exposed to things like that. So she was one of the first people. She was the first person to introduce me to a new world. And I would say Mr. Kwame Lillard, we were super, super close. He was one of the Freedom Riders. He was one of the people that actually desegregated the counters here in Nashville back in the '60s. And he's been super, super adamant about passing the torch. And I love him. He's the best. Stories for days. He always talks about his work with Diane Nash and John Lewis and Malcolm X. And it's always like, oh my God, I'm just so tuned in. I can feel the ancestors through him as he's speaking. So it's really cool. I would say Rashida Fatuga, the founder of Gideon's Army, always there, supportive. There are many people, especially back home in Memphis, that mentored me. So I wouldn't be where I am without them.
I love that you said that your mentors helped you to think about how we bridge the gap, how we do this work cross-generational, and that it's not just up to one group of persons or one age group of persons, but it's up to all of us. What does that work look like when you are working with multiple generations of people, from children to adults? And do you see how you are passing on some of those concepts of activism to younger generations?
Absolutely. I have a goal. I do not want to do, I don't want to be doing the same thing that I'm doing now, 10 years from now. I want somebody else to be in this spot being interviewed for their activism, not me. And so I have mentees that I like to call them that, I help them with their leadership skills, with how to plan a protest, how to, react if you are being arrested, small things like that, that really create a strong mentee-mentor relationship. But yeah.
That's great. That is awesome. That is awesome. So our subject today is women in activism. Talk a little bit about how critical it is for women to be involved in activism. How important is it for us to make sure that our voices are heard in multiple spaces?
It's super important because we are Black women, which means that we are a double minority, which means that we have not one but two fights. So it's super important to be involved in, a movement that literally changes the trajectory of your future.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Very, very important. Very important. So I also heard you say that you are involved in community work with churches, with local organizations. So give us a little bit more on how we can, in our church spaces, in our school spaces, how we can do this work and make sure that this work goes forward.
Say specifically for churches to allow people to help. Sometimes, how the Black churches, they feel like, this is our responsibility to do, and, really aren't receptive to help or assistance from activists or organizers. And also just speak out more. Just speak out more.
So when you say speak out more, is there a certain church or is there a church model that you have seen that you feel like they're getting it right? They're doing what I feel that how the church can be beneficial to this movement or to the multiple movements across the
Absolutely. Mount Carmel Baptist Church, Bishop Campbell, oh my gosh, it seems like every week he's doing like a free drive for the kids or free backpacks or free, and most churches nowadays tend to like ask and don't give, which is the opposite, of what the church is really supposed to be doing, in my opinion. That's a totally separate conversation. But I do feel like churches are lacking in a lot of areas, but there are churches like the church in Mount Carmel that, do the work and do the mission of the gospel.
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that our churches can do so much better. And I really appreciate that you are involved with multiple organizations and it's not just one like nonprofit, but it's churches, it's nonprofits, it's foundations, and you're starting your own and creating scholarships. So to me, that says that activism doesn't have just one lens. It doesn't have just going out and marching, but there are so many different ways that
Right.
people Yeah, there's so many different ways that people can get involved and be a part of furthering equality.
You just took the
And
words right out of my mouth. I always say that because of social media, people tend to think that protesting is the end all be all to help that you can give to the movement, and it's not. It's just the most amplified because we see the cool pictures of people in the front with the signs, and they think, oh, this is the only way I can get involved, but I'm scared. There are so many different ways to be involved in the movement. You have the financiers, the people who monetarily give, who may not be able to march for 2 miles. You have the people on the front line, aka me, who we aren't afraid of getting arrested and losing a job because we're in jail or putting our bodies on the line. We're not afraid to do those things. So we need people on the front line. We need people who can literally fund the movement. We need people who can be on the background organizing, bail funds. We have so many different, routes to freedom and spaces for people to be involved into that process. I think that, again, protesting is just the most amplified, but there are so many different ways.
I heard you earlier, you mentioned that one of your mentors gave you a lot of information in regards to the civil rights movement. And I really admire the civil rights movement because just what you said happened, right? We have the people who were protesting at the front line, but there were also a lot of there was a lot of background work that was being done, that was in churches, that was in organizations, that allowed for the protests to be put forward, and help to advance the civil rights movement. Talk to me a little bit more about how we can connect secular and spiritual. I feel like you've done a great job with that, with being involved with the church and being involved with external organizations. So what do you think that looks like with us intertwining or engaging both the secular and the spiritual in spaces for activism?
I think that requires putting pride to the side. A lot of times people, secular, spiritual, aren't allowed to collaborate simply because of just, internal conflicting issues. Let's just be honest, people from the church can be a little judgmental, and, it's a part of the lack of unity that, Black people can sometimes have. And I think in a way, this may be problematic, but I think in a way that is a result of the multi-generational trauma that we have, seeing slavery, families being broken up. We have so much trauma that's instilled in us that we don't really even know. So yeah.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned like from slavery until now. And even when we look at now, we're preparing for one of the most historic elections, I think, probably of our time, one of the most puffed up and mediaized, or, we see it on social media, we see it on the TV, we see it everywhere. And for some people, this space or this time, especially with dealing with COVID, it's been overwhelming. So give us some, I heard in your bio that you also are linked with mental health and mental health in the community. So give us some tips that you would give for self-care, even in these times of COVID, dealing with voting, dealing with racism and police brutality. How can we maintain focus on the issues at hand and make sure that we're moving forward and not being stagnant?
Yes, I always say that rest is revolutionary and it is a part of self-care. There are so many simple things that make such a drastic effect on our body. There have been times where I literally would not go to sleep because I'm up on Twitter, on social media, watching like police brutality videos and it just being plastered everywhere and the world freezing and people just going crazy. And, it can be a lot. And so definitely rest is so important. I'm literally burning a candle right now on my nightstand as I'm talking to
I
you.
thought I was the only
Simple
one.
things like that, like incense, if you're into saging or smudging, candles. I'm a plant mom of 13. So taking care of my plants really like calms and relaxes me. Keeping fresh flowers in my space in my home. There's so many small things. You have to find the self-care regimen that works for you. I'm more of a holistic person, so I like, flowers and plants and candles and incense and stuff. But that may be different from another person. Somebody's version of self-care could be traveling or, being by the water. So it really just depends on you. But those are some of the things that I do for self-care.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. This conversation is good. I am a plant mom as well. I have one plant. I don't have 13. I have one.
I have one right here.
I have one plant, but I love that you said burning candles, meditation,
Yes,
getting something
meditation,
that
yoga.
yes, yes, yes. Yoga is also is a definitely a great way to rest your mind, to recenter, to refocus, to as my old yoga instructor would say, breathe in something that you need and breathe out what doesn't serve you.
Yes.
It's a way for us to just connect internally so that we can prepare for what is next externally. And I think that you hit the nail right on the head when you said rest is important.
Yes.
Our brain health, making sure that we are drinking water, making sure that we are resting our minds, making sure that we are eating right, making
social
sure
media breaks.
I have to take a social media break every Friday. I'm like, one day I'm not gonna watch, I'm not gonna look, I'm not gonna look at the videos because like you said, you get lost in that vortex of just that rabbit hole of social media and start watching videos and then seeing how people believe and thinking that that's the way that people believe and it really takes a toll on you. So I love that you said these different things that you do, especially being someone who is very involved with activism, that there are certain things that you do to make sure that you are ready to take on the world.
Yes.
And take on the tasks that are asked of you.
Yes, I always say that. Oh, I'm sorry. I always
go
say
ahead.
that you cannot pour from an empty cup. You just can't do it. You can't pour in the community until you first pour into yourself. So
Yes,
that's how I look at self-care. When I feel like, and I've been doing this work for so long. Well, not so long. I'm only 24, but I've been doing this work for at least the past couple of years, and I know when I'm about to get burned out. So I immediately do not disturb. It's my best friend on my phone. I will go on a quick vacation by myself because I love solo traveling. Just small things, but it is super, super important.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So as we prepare to transition to our question and answer, I wanted to ask you one last question. Give us your definitions of what activism and social justice are to you, or as defined by you, and what that looks like in 2020 and for generations to come.
I think that activism is the rent that I pay for living on Earth. If I could pay the Earth for allowing me to take up space on her land, it would be activism. That's the only way that I could, repay her, is to be a part of something that's bigger than myself. And I will also leave people with this. If you've ever wondered what you would have done during the civil rights movement. So if you watch those old movies like Selma and all the other civil rights movies with your friends or your parents, and you're wondering at the end of that movie, oh my gosh, what would I would have done? You're doing it right now. And if that's nothing, then I encourage you to get involved in this movement in any kind of way. If you go to my website, JeneishaHarris.com, that's Jeneisha Harris, HARRIS.com. If you go on my website, the last tab that says activism, there's so many resources that I've provided for people because I get asked, this question a lot. What can we do? What are next steps? I've listed some great Black grassroots organizations here in Nashville and Tennessee that you can get involved with, that you can volunteer with, that you can become a member within, that you can donate to. I've also included a book list because I feel like before the physical political revolution, we have to have an intellectual evolution first, because reading should come before the work, and you can't do the work if you don't know about the work. And so learning is key. So I have a book list provided, and also just ways that you can get involved beyond Tennessee and Nashville if you would like. So go check that out if you will. But I definitely wanted to leave, some action steps for people to plug into before I left, because I am a person of a follow-up. I love a good follow-up. So yeah.
Okay, I said that was my last question. I might have told a story because you talked about how we have to study and we have to be well versed and knowledgeable about what this work looks like, what it has looked like for generations before us, and how people have interacted and engaged with civil work and activism and social justice, and even dating back all the way to the Bible, right? The Bible tells us that we should do justice, we should love mercy, and we should walk humbly with our God. Tell Jeneisha, give me just a little bit of your give me a little bit of your takeaways from your journey thus far with activism and some of the things that you've learned, some of the key points that you have. I know that's a loaded question, right? How can I end with that? But just give us some.
Yes, very loaded question. The biggest thing that I've learned, the hardest lesson, this was such a hard lesson. One of the hardest lessons for me to learn is that Black people are not monolithic, meaning that all Black people are not the same. We all do not want the same things. We all don't want to be in the same spaces. The hardest lesson that I've had to learn is that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And it's so heartbreaking because we feel like we both live in the same country, we're from the same neighborhood, we both, we share the same skin complexion. We should think alike, we should want the same things because we're going through the same thing. But a lot of people, don't think that way. And I think that's the hardest pill that I've had to swallow, is that all kinfolk ain't kinfolk. And that activism is a journey. This movement is a journey. I would love to wake up tomorrow and all the problems that Black people face be fixed, but that's not going to happen. And so it's a journey. It's a journey. So yeah.
Beautiful. That's some good jewels for everyone listening. That all skin folks ain't kin folks, and that's I'm sure that's a hard lesson and a pill to swallow. But I know that, yeah, I know that as you progress and as you grow and as you learn that you'll be able to tell future generations and tell other women in activism and other people in general that are in activism some of these jewels and lessons that you've learned. So thank you so much. Dr. Walker, I'm going to open it to our Q&A from Facebook. Are there any questions that we have?
I don't see any questions on here. So I did send you a message stating that I wanted you to expound a little bit more about the whole concept of the spiritual and secular intersection that we see with social justice and activism. If you could talk a little bit more about that, in our ending thoughts, I kind of want us to wrap up there.
I would say that I wish there was more of the two. Again, I think that the secular and the spiritual spaces don't really connect sometimes well. It's because one, there's a lot of judgment and pride, maybe on both sides, just like with any, other movement or any other piece of work that you're going to do together collectively. But I think it's a mixture of a lot of judgment from one side to the other, and unity is something that we're lacking in organizing spaces specifically. So yeah, I think it's a little of both of those.
And I think if I could add to that, I think that it's so it's definitely been very insightful in this last election to see how secular and spiritual have intersected, and how we see that especially what we've always known this in the Black community, right? When election time comes around, you start to see the politicians, they come to your church, they put a little money in the basket so that they can get your vote. And on the other side of that, with us going into the state or us going into government, I think that we should be a little bit more consistent and intentional about making sure that we make those connections so that when we are speaking up about issues of injustice that are happening in our communities, when we are wanting to see things happen and make sure that there is equity and advocacy in these marginalized communities, that we're just being consistent and always knowing who are our advocates, who are the people who are in our corner, who are the people who are keeping their word, right? Because we vote a lot of these people in and we don't necessarily follow up, like you said, Jeneisha, we don't follow up with them. We don't double check. We don't say, hey, remember when you told us you was going to talk about prayer in school? Remember when you told us that you were going to talk about that breakfast program for inner city youth? We have to be more intentional as a spiritual community to follow back and follow up with those things which people have promised us. And we also have to take on that activism mindset to know that we are activists in the church by the ways in which we, again, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God as well as with the community that we're in.
That's well said. I know we're coming to an end, but you really pull something out because of what's happening with COVID. People don't have that same platform. So they're not able to go to the church and give this speech or this spiel. So how do you think, because of it, and this is to both Demetria and Jeneisha, how do you believe activism or this whole thing around social and political stance is because of COVID? What are you going to see different? What are you looking for that's going to be different, or the promises or the work that's going to be different as a result of what we've seen through this pandemic? Are we waiting on people to tell us, make us promises, or we're not looking for the promises anymore?
I think Malcolm X has a quote that said, the biggest mistake of the movement is trying to organize a sleeping people. You have to wake the people up first, and then you'll get action. And so this summer, we saw a multitude of action in Palestine, in London, in Paris, in the States when George Floyd was murdered. And that amplification created this type of frustration with people. And then being in the midst of a pandemic, people were really burning things up because they were fed up. So I think sometimes it takes issues to knock on our front door for us to care about them. We don't care about healthcare until, our one of our parents is diagnosed with cancer and they can't afford chemotherapy. We don't really care about police brutality until it's one of our cousins that's being killed by the police. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, these issues have to knock on our front doorstep for us to care about them. But with the pandemic, the issues knocked on everybody's front doorstep. So people were concerned about healthcare. People were concerned about food, about water, about rent. So many issues were amplified under this pandemic. And so I always like to see a silver lining in things. Of course, COVID is horrible. And God, where's the souls of the people who, died from COVID? I got an alert today. Somebody else passed from COVID-19 here in Nashville. And so our numbers are going up. And so it's very serious. But it's also a blessing in disguise because people are starting to wake up. And now we're seeing the movement being elevated because people are woken up. You can't care about an issue if you don't know about it. And so now everybody knows about it, and now everybody wants to get involved. So
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think that for me, one of the biggest pieces of information that I learned from this pandemic was there is an accessibility issue on multiple levels, especially when we think about technology, when we think about access to technology, when we think about education, when we think about children who need to be trained in STEM. This really blew up the STEM conversation, right? Because now children are literally having to log in from a computer. They're having to learn how to navigate the computer. And for students who don't have a computer at home in the first place, students who don't have access to the internet outside of maybe a phone, we saw that there was a lot of inequality with the ways in which technology, as well as jobs and other resources, the accessibility factor. So for me, I think that I'm looking for politicians who are thinking or who are forward thinking, who are looking for ways in which they can prepare the next generation of leaders. I think that the pandemic helped us to get out of that complacency. And it helped us to kind of think about, hey, who do we have on our city council? Because now I have time to look at the council
yeah,
meetings. Who do we have who is in the Senate? Because now I have time to look at the Senate review, the Judiciary Senate review for the next Chief Justice. And I think that that is so important when we think about how we are to engage the political arena and engage with activism. Is definitely an accessibility piece for me. I'm looking for people who are going to say, look, we're here now, but let's think about how we're going to move forward. Let's think about what the future looks like. Let's think about what this future looks like for our children. And it's disheartening when I see that we have people who have been in office for decades and people who have been in office for just 4 years who do not believe the statistics, and they don't believe the scientific research, and they don't believe the experts. And I'm like, these people are experts for a reason. This information is accessible for a reason, so that we can make data-driven decisions moving forward and making sure that our community is advancing in the right direction. But to me, this has shown me that there are so many different pieces of this puzzle, more than just, like Jeneisha said, more than just protesting and walking outside, more than just giving $10 to a GoFundMe account. But we have to be sure that we're educating ourselves, that we're staying afloat and staying abreast on current news, that we're not just voting in the presidential elections, but we're voting in the Senate, we're voting in the local, we're voting in all of the state elections, which are happening also this time. I really have been encouraged, and I hope that that is the same for a lot of other people who have been a part of the pandemic and had to have this extra time and extra ability to just look out and see what other ways can I make sure that I'm informed and knowledgeable.
yeah.
This has been such a great conversation. Thank you both so much, Jeneisha and Demetria. You have really given us a wealth of information, a lot of food for thought. I was so excited. I told Dr. Howard this time I wanted to step aside and let you all, guide the conversation, because I know both of you are very much aware of or have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in terms of social justice and activism. Demetria, I heard you on a panel discussion a few weeks ago, like right when the Breonna Taylor verdict was given. And I was like, yeah, you got to come and have a conversation with us, because you were dropping so many wisdom nuggets about how we process what's going on and how we can be more involved. And one of the things that I was hopeful that would come out as a result of this conversation is we introduce our audience to the many ways of being active. And, you know, just like what you were talking about is through our elections, through getting involved. And I love what you talked about, pushing our politicians to make data informed decisions based on the statistics and the research that's out there. And Jeneisha, the information that you've given about activism and what that work looks like ongoing in both secular and spiritual spaces is so important for us this day and age. So thank you both so much for such an engaging conversation on tonight. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. You know, I've been in conversation with your publicist, Daryl Nolan, and so he's the one who put us in communication together. And I was
Yes.
thanking him for connecting us. I know he does some great work for you. So hats
Yes.
off to your publicist as well.
He's a good friend.
Yes. Dr. Howard, do you have any announcements you want to make before we close us out tonight?
I just want to remind everybody or tell everybody really quick, LeadHerSpace, we're going to start our Marketplace Monday. So on Monday, you'll have a chance to tell us about what you're selling. Tell us about your business. Let us get involved. Let us support each other through these business opportunities. If you're selling, if you are entrepreneur, if you have something that you want to share, we want to buy. We want to support you. Our community wants to support you. We want to help to engage and to honor the work that you're doing. So that'll come out. You'll hear about that, and then you'll hear about our Fridays. What do we call it, Dr. Walker? Friday, fresh
Friday, Feature Friday.
Feature Friday, yes. You know, Dr. Walker has.
We're putting a spotlight on our members.
Say that again.
We're going to put the spotlight on our members about all of their accomplishments, the awards, all the great things that they're doing in the community.
Yeah. So we look forward to that. This has been a wonderful night. Next month, towards next month, early December, we are going to be back on, and we're going to help you figure out how do you invest your money. How do you put this money to work? We want you to spend for Christmas. We want you to have some Christmas money, but we want you to take some of that money and put it into some stocks and learn how to invest and spend your money wisely. So we're excited about what we're doing at LeadHerSpace. We have some incredible women leading. We have some incredible entrepreneurs. We have some incredible people who are in this space who want to help guide you, who want to help guide your daughters, your nieces, who want to just help build this movement up. So I'm grateful. Thank you all so much for a wonderful night. This has been an incredible night on activism. I am excited. You know, I may want to go out and do a march or two. I did march. I didn't get arrested, but I did. I have marched. So I'm excited about the continued work. Go follow Jeneisha, JeneishaHarris.com. Go follow her and learn how to get involved. Learn how to be more active. Where do you start? How do you start? You don't have to, it doesn't mean that you have to actually protest, or we're not asking you to go and be locked up and not have a job. But what we're saying, there are ways for you to be involved. There are ways for your voice to be heard so that you don't have to be silent. So thank you so much. I'll turn it over back to Dr. Walker to dismiss us.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to our viewing audience. Thank you to our guests. And thank you to the LeadHerSpace community. We are 150 members strong right now, and we continue to grow. And so we're excited about this because we launched about 3 months ago, I think maybe 2 to 3 months ago, and we have 150 members. And so if you know any women who would be interested in the conversations that we have or just sharing in our community, everyone can join. It's open to anyone who wants this information and wants to be a part with us. So we welcome you. Please send us their information. Please send an invitation or send us a note, and we'll make sure that they're invited into our group. And we look forward to more information that will be posted throughout the week about LeadHerSpace and how you can join the community. So thank you once again for joining us. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Right. I just stopped the live screen, so we're good, and I'm about to stop the recording. So thanks so much.